Hi, my name is Timothy Van Tynen, and I did the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This church is very key in religious history as well as history, uh, and it has a lot of main historical events. It's always in the background, I feel, from the research I've done uh, of most historical events in European, Eastern European especially, and Middle East history. Uh, it is tied to the world's biggest religions, and uh, without further ado, and I do apologize for everything that I'm a little rusty on. This is not my kind of thing, but I'll do my best, and I hope I keep you guys entertained with all the things that I do wrong and do right. So I do apologize for this, and thank you for watching, I guess. Uh, Church of the Holy Sepulchre had a lot of historical events take place within its walls. It is the church that Jesus got crucified near. This church was not standing when uh, he was crucified, and had all those terrible things happen to him, but I'll kind of explain on why it was put where it was put here soon. This is a Roman church with a lot of religious and non-religious things happening in it and near the church. I will lay out the history and the story of the church from start to end like a timeline, in a timeline format. I go through the significance and the things that happened to the church, as well as some major events that took place because of the church or the religions it's tied to. I'll kind of go into some details of uh, big current, or not current, historical events. I don't want to, I don't know, spoil it, I guess, if you're really into this, spoil it, but I will go into depth. The church was built in Jerusalem. It was built during the Old Kingdom in 335 AD. It was built by Roman Emperor Constantine I. It replaced a temple that was in its place of the church. Constantine built this church because he had recently converted to Christianity, and I'll kind of go over why he converted and in more details, not a lot, but into some details on why he did it. So, when the church was being built, it had to be demolished. The temple that stood there first. During the demolition, they found the tomb that the they believed to be none other than the Son of Man, or better known as Jesus' tomb. Or so they believed. The reason Emperor Constantine chose this spot because of the history behind it. His mother, Saint Helena, traversed and traveled the Holy Land and found these extremely historical places from the Bible that had taken place over 300 years ago during the construction of the church. It is believed that the true cross was a part of it as well. The true cross is Jesus' cross, and that would be included in the church's original building and future buildings as well. Here we have, this is somewhat of what the original church would have looked like from this point of view, but they really made this a key figure here to allow people to visit Christ's tomb and all that good stuff. It's a little bit, this is a rough outline of what it kind of looked like. I'll go into another picture here in a second of what it looked like from a different point of view. The church it was a fairly big structure for the time. Nothing huge or gargantuan or just massive, but it was a significant building. It included a church, a holy place, but it also included a place like a court and just a day-to-day building for the Jerusalems and the Romans and the people of this time in this area that could just do day-to-day things. This is the true cross here, and this is where they believed it was hung the first time. I'm not sure. Just wanted to add a picture of what kind of the inside of the church was like. Uh, the church is also known as one of the two of the holiest places on earth. The tomb of Christ is a key part of the church and adds the feel of the church. There's a shrine for his tomb, and it's called Aticula. I'm sorry for butchering that if I did. Because of the significance of the Aticula, it is a major destination for Christians and other religions throughout time. The construction of the church started because of the Emperor Constantine had a vision, and this is going kind of into why he converted. and why he built the church. He had a vision he called a cross in the sky. And this caused him to convert into Christianity, and along with his family. So he sent his mother, Saint Helena, to find the historical and religious places in Jerusalem and surrounding areas. When she found the three crosses, they believed they found their resting place for Christ, and called Calvary. That is the the mountain that Jesus was crucified on. Uh, after the tomb was confirmed as Christ's tomb, and the church was constructed on September 13, 335. It was commonplace for religious people to visit and pray. The church was built in with two different buildings. As I previously stated, the two buildings served different purposes, but all were part of the same, the church. But uh, one is a place of worship and a place for Christians to visit Christ's tombs. The other building, known as the Basilica, uh, building is similar to a town hall of today's world, but it served a purpose as a court building and a place for people of Jerusalem to use as a day-to-day building, as I previously stated. Uh, and these three pictures here are not the original building. As you can see, the quality of the picture kind of give that away. But I wanted to throw this in here to kind of show you they built this antechamber around the tomb of Christ so people could visit it without minimal destruction happening in it, because overcrowding, and they did a good job of opening it up and allowing people to really get in there and doing that. Now the tomb is widely debated. Sorry for putting Christ there instead of tomb. Among people and historians alike, the most evidence points to the church, the Holy Sepulchre. This place that you're looking at as the picture is visited by many people each year, religious, non-religious, people that really dive into history, because Jesus was a huge part of history, regardless if you believe in what he stands for and what he was here for. He's just a major figure in history, because religion has always been a part of human history. Uh, for as long as we could talk, there was a religion, and that's why he's just a key figure. As I previously said, I'd show you the picture of what it could have looked like and what they believe the church looked like in its original state before some things transpired that I'll go over later here in the video. As you can see here, it just looks a little, old-fashioned type building, So some things are gonna happen to it because they're all using techniques that were ancient, so they weren't the greatest. So there's things that are going to happen to this church, and I'll go over what's going to happen. In the year 1614, a fire broke out when the Sassanid Empire attacked and invaded Jerusalem. Sorry for probably butchering that name. During these events, the true cross of Jesus was stolen and taken by the Sassanid people. But the Emperor Hercules recaptured Jerusalem. He negotiated for the true cross back and rebuilt the church in 630 AD. Although it was now controlled by a Muslim nation, the emperors protected the church and many other Christian and Jewish religious sites. At the time before two holy wars and holy wars broke out and constant conflict, the Muslim people and emperors and rulers did a very good job at making sure no one got into fights and destroyed these huge artifacts. A Muslim by the name of Kabir Umar ibn al-Khattabi, a key figure of the Muslim faith at the time, visited the church and the tomb of Christ, but prayed outside because he felt that if he prayed inside, the church would be turned into a mosque, and he did not want that. He also prohibited any Muslim from praying inside the church, just to ensure that the church was not rebuilt and made into a mosque. He felt like it shouldn't be a mosque, even though he was a Muslim, because he realized that Jewish faith is how Muslim faith was built, and he realized that the key components of the church that it had for the future. In the year 841 AD, The first of the few fires broke out and did some damage to the church. And a much bigger fire broke out in the year 938 AD. The fire broke out in the Basilica instead of the church. In 966 AD, a riot started after the army of Byzantine was defeated. The fire destroyed the beautiful roof and ceilings, but in 1009 AD, the destruction of the church was carried out by Fatimid Caliph al-Hachman. This was a start of a Jewish and Christian persecution by the Muslims. They also did this to many other Christian and Jewish sites in Jerusalem and other Muslim nations at the time. This really started the beginnings of terrorism, and I'm not linking that just to Muslim. It happened in Catholic faith as well as Christian. If you look at Ireland and the things that are happening there, even today, just constant fights between religion, which is not a good way to show that you're the religion that someone should transfer or switch to or conform to, So it's just, yeah, I don't know what I'm trying to say, so I apologize for the rambling. But this was really the start of the headbutting of the three dominant religions in the world at the time. This is the church's beautiful glass ceiling that was destroyed in a fire. Although the church was known for its location and what it sits on, it was also known for its beauty and decoration. Almost every time it burned, it took something historical with it. Luckily, we have the church and its amazing art and beautiful craftsmanship around. And the tomb of Christ was never lost either, despite the continuous fires, destruction, and rebuilding of the church. The church really aimed at trying to capture the historical value of Christianity and more so Jewish and the Israelites and what they went through. And they really wanted to decorate it with historical facts other than just the tomb and the cross of Jesus. They wanted to bring it and make it a destination for all people, like even non-religious people, to visit and have historical value to it. But although at the early times it was really just a place to worship, it was kind of like a museum as well. Even though the fires would happen quite often, but with the long histories it has, it's bound to happen, and things badly do happen. The rebuilding of the church in 1027 AD, Emperor Constantine IX and Caliph Ali Zafir agreed and came to an agreement to allow the church section of the church, not the basilica or the court or the day-to-day building, to be rebuilt if a mosque could be built near it. But it did not go as planned. While the one part of the building was being built extremely slow, the other part sat there in rubble. And during the rebuilding of the the church was put on hold due to the lack of resources. So the resources went to other buildings as well. After it finally completed, it was not the same looking church as it was laid out, much different, with a huge courtyard with chapel rooms instead of big worship rooms. And the tomb of Jesus was opened in the courtyard. During the rebuilding, control of Jerusalem changed a few times, making the rebuild take even longer. And this is what really, how do I explain this? Sorry. The Crusades. Sorry about this. Crusades affected a lot of Europe. In the Middle East, the Crusades started with the First Crusade. During this phase of the Crusades, the church was built up again, and due to the fact that the Christians were trying to find a homeland, there was lots of bloodshed all over the world, and not necessarily the world, but Europe and the Middle East, especially between Germany and all the way to the Church of the Holy In 1069 AD, the main goal was to retake the power uh, of Israel from the nations that had previously taken power. The Byzantine Emperor called upon Pope Urban II for support. He agreed with this, and lots of Western European people, from high to low classes, took up arms. Not only did the Crusades attack Muslims, but Jews were also targeted as well. Most of the bloodshed happened in the eastern parts of Europe, but the end goal was never reached. The reason I point this out is because the goal was to take Jerusalem and make the Christian nation or state. Uh, but fighting took place between Eastern and Western Europe at the time. I also point out and go into detail of the Crusades because what happens with these events that takes place is what way the church goes and who assumes control of it. Uh, if things panned out differently, the church may have played a even bigger role in history or even smaller one, but we will never know. Uh, it kind of happened. When the crusade stopped, the first leader, Godfrey of Bouillon, gave himself the title of protector slash defender of the Holy Sepulchre. Sorry, I keep mispronouncing that. And the Crusades were a huge, huge thing that happened in history, especially if you are religious. It kind of marked the bad times of Christianity and felt like they needed to take up arms and really convert the way that church and religion was done. Uh, Lots of bloodshed between both sides and the defenders and the attackers, but the end goal was never reached, especially during the First Crusades. They wanted a homeland and the Holy Church of Sepulchre to be the main place that held their values. And things just didn't go well in any of the Crusades, but it just ultimately led to nothing. I mean, people kept migrating. They called them pilgrims, kept migrating to the church in the area of Jerusalem, but no true state was considered or taken over. Although there was a lot of pilgrims that eventually migrated to this area, mainly of the Christian faith. Nothing really happened past that, especially during the first one. Uh, During the Crusade time or period, as most historians call it, the church underwent more construction with new leaders in charge. The first of such was a cistern. A cistern is made up of to catch water. This was put in by the old basilica. The Crusaders who had made the travels to Jerusalem wanted to find the true cross as well. Once the true cross was located, it was put in a chapel that this former cistern was made into this chapel that held the true cross. There's a period of the First Crusade where the church was no longer. Sorry, that's the wrong where. Church was no longer under their control, and it was believed that the Gorgonians took control of this and closed the church during the time. There's not a lot written on this part, and I do apologize, but there's just not a lot about the Georgians or whatever. I'm sorry, I probably botched so many words, but whatever. There's just not a lot of history on it and what happened to the church, but ultimately they believe it was closed and nobody really touched it as far as we know. The late Crusades, when the church was taken back by the Crusaders, a man by the name of William of Tyre, the chronicler of the Crusades in the 12th century, ordered a remodel and renovation of the church. During these times, the Crusaders dug up more and more artifacts around the church and from the old churches. And like as mean old churches, I mean the old holy the Church of Sepulchre was after it was burned, it was never truly rebuilt. Once the Muslim nation, the Sysadins, I believe you should call them, never really rebuilt the church back to what it was supposed to be in the eyes of the Christian faith, and especially the leaders of the Crusades and the Crusaders. Uh, Along with this they changed the way the church looked inside as well, adding artifacts back to the church and decoration. The church is redecorating the church as well. Uh, during this, a goal was achieved as well. Of the all of the holy places were linked under one roof once again. The tomb and the place the cross sat was relinked. During the Treaty of the Third Crusade, the church was lost once again, and most holy places in the world were now under new control once again. This took place in 1187 AD. As you can see here, I've added a picture of the Crusades and the Crusaders and what it did look like. There wasn't much fighting around the actual church, but their end goal was to take the church and make it a main place, as I previously stated. Some did get there. The end goal of a true Christian nation was never reached, though. They'd taken regions and parts, but they never really had a state that really lasted. Uh, as you can see, the Georgians took over and closed everything down, as I previously stated. Things just didn't go as planned for the Crusades, and maybe for better or for worse, but uh, they did have their reign in certain areas. They had their power over the church, and I think they did a pretty good job at making it a better place, and really took away from the more gothic view and making it dark. They made it lighter. They had similar uh, as we they had similar architect to the gothic view, but they really brightened it up and kept it in uh, more of an old fashioned. And maybe this was before the Gothic really took over, but they allowed it, and they had bright painting and lots of artifacts in the church. The Ottomans were the next people to really take over the church, and this is a superpower even in today's world, almost into World War One. The Ottomans reigned and held control of the church for a very long time. There's a time between the Crusades and period of Ottoman period. Things did not change much, but as the Ottoman Empire grew, the church stood uh, and eventually was taken by the Ottomans in the year 1545 AD. The bell's supports failed, as in the bell tower, uh, and the higher levels of the church fell to the floor. It was renovated once again in 1555 AD. They did not rebuild or add on to it during this, but they fixed the things that were broken. Never states clear on why the bell tower fell, but in most of it, they just believe it just after time and wear and tear, where they had that time where it was closed and things like that. Things just happened, and this is quite a long time after it was actually remodeled. But there was a dark period once again where the church's history was kind of lost, or just not really much happening there. It took 10 years for the people to actually fix the mess. I would assume they cleaned it up, but they didn't really fix the bell tower. Uh, during this the renovation, they also added the antechamber, as I showed you earlier, around the tomb of Jesus to keep it safe, just in case things fell or broke again. They could keep that tomb of Jesus is safe. And this was made out of marble and limestone. And this is really significant because this is the first time it actually was protected from people and events that took place outside of the church or even in it. The Crusades were a bloody thing, so there could have been scuffles and things that happened, but and lots of holy wars and not necessarily wars, but just conflict between the three religions happening in the area that really dominated in this area, and things could have went wrong. Fires broke out, so we're kind of lucky if you're a Christian or just a lover of history that nothing actually happened to the tomb. If this is in fact Jesus' tomb, which a lot of evidence points to this, and the true cross as well. The true cross, they truly believe that this is the cross that Jesus was crucified on. So a lot of things could have happened in the church, but never really did. But they really, I think the Ottomans and the leaders of this did a good job at making sure nothing does happen to the church itself. While the Ottomans continued to rule, the church was led by two groups, the Franciscans and the Orthodox. We know a lot about the Orthodox. It's a Orthodox Jew, etc., and Eastern Orthodox Christians. So it's a major groups at this time. These times of the church were darker than normal. Even more attacks happening. Both groups had tensions were high. a lot of tensions in the previous, but for some reason these two groups did not like each other, but wanted to control the church more so than uh, two groups that really dominated the area more, not necessarily two groups that but two parts of the religion that just clash constantly. And this just was recipe for disaster. So luckily they fortified it and put that antechamber there, but nothing happened. These attacks continued for hundreds of years as the church was already under new rule, was always under new rule from one side or the other. In 1699, a treaty was agreed upon, and the church moved forward until around 1757 before we continue as American history has started. So, colonialism happening, but that's besides the point. Holy Week started in 1757 and a fight broke out. Nothing too violent actually occurred, but there was a huge thing that really rocked this church and separated it from its core. And it did not go well for the church at the time. So, yet another fire broke out in 1808 AD. The fire caused plenty of damage along the way. After the fire stopped, they had needed to remodel yet again. They rebuilt the rotunda and the antechamber around Jesus' tomb. Sorry for the lack of information here, but this is roughly where everything starts to slow down for the history of the church. Uh, in some recent history, a time of the rest, or a time a time of rest or a time of nothing significant surrounding the church. After the dome was fixed and made of iron in the year 1868 AD, not much happened with the church as far as big historical moments. I mean, the church saw the Ottoman Empire fall after World War One. The birth of new nations like Palestine and Israel. Palestine went, but with no cost to the church. Nothing really significant happened to the church during these times. After World War Two, Israel was born, a Jewish country, the first Jewish country since the time of the Bible. So this was significant because a Christian or a biblical, more of a Bible opposed to like a Quran, it has taken over the land of which the church sits on now. Uh, this is big in really moving forward the church in a religious way. Now that somebody Jesus was a Jewish man is taking over the church and has really allowed this to really grow as far as a tourist and destination and a religious destination around the world. So this is big, although lots of conflict between Palestine and Israel, but that's not anything to do with the church. Inside the church, lots of small add-ons were included in the church, like separate chapels, separate worship rooms or areas. Some of these include altar in Syriac Chapel, prison of Christ before renovation, uh, Chapel of Saint Bertram, Chapel of Innovation of the Holy Cross, and the Chapel of Saint Helena. These are also things that people visit and play a role in the building of the church and the history as well. Like the Chapel of St. Helena. This section contains ruins of the old basilica from the previous when it was burned down and never actually truly rebuilt after the Muslim nation took over and destroyed the church, as I previously said. So they built a room around it and they call it the Chapel of St. Helena. So this is big because, these ruins are very old and are tied to their actual original church and the rebuilds, and it's very time based. And also the old temple. Some ruins were kept by the old temple. I believe it is a Roman temple that actually stood there before the church. While the Holy Roman Empire actually ruled, they had their own temple, and so the people of the church actually kept it. We don't really know how they kept it. I did some research to try and dig into it, but I could not find too much about it. So I don't really know how they got there, but they do have remnants and remains from the original church. The prison of Christ is a place that people believe that Jesus was held. They believed he was held here during this trial before his crucifixion. So yet another huge piece of a religious background added to this. I mean, Jesus is here. He's on trial. He's about to get crucified. Everybody, I mean, people know he's innocent. People don't. There's lots of tension. So this is where he's held, they believe, at this time. So yeah, another huge find near the site. So and this is all incorporated into one big building now. So there's lots of things happening on this church that people will love to visit. Uh, and see, these are some pictures, the beautiful paintings on the walls of, supper, and the actual tomb here on the left. As you can see here, it's actually encased in glass now to really keep it uh, clean and make sure nothing really happens to it. But as I previously said, they have a lot of decorations happening here to really draw people to it. And as you can see here, I would believe this is Hebrew or even Greek, but I would assume Hebrew. So, there's lots of things happening right now. Uh, Mary and Mary Magdalene, these people watching over the tomb, and you have the paintings over here that you can't closely see here, but lots of things happening to really draw in the beautiful marble floor, as I said earlier. Who knows how old these things really are? But this really allows you to see it and actually have a taste for his tomb. Uh, this is a place, I believe, that is part of the St. Helena Chapel that hold the ruins, and the ruins are actually closed off for a very long, for most of the year. So it's very hard to get into these places because of the historic, the age of the ruins. So you actually have to ask to get to this place. But I could be wrong with this picture. It didn't really state on where it was, so I do apologize. But it is a very cool picture nonetheless, even if you're not necessarily a Christian or Jewish or religious for that fact. But these are just some of the artifacts and things that are in the church and that are extremely old, and some of the paintings that have been here for hundreds of years and that are still here today. I think it's very special, even if you're not uh, religious, as I said, but just love art and remnants and relics, and it is very cool. And it has a cool feel. I would love to visit it, but obviously it's not about that. Summary. I went over the history and the backstory of this amazing church that has played a role in history since Jesus. Uh, it might not be for the first thing that you think of when you think of the Bible or history itself, but ever since it was built, it was the background of the Middle East and Eastern European history for over 1,000 years. Uh, and it still stands today, maybe not as its original form, but the form based around God and history itself. The church has been through things that people might not think of or fathom. It was burned more times than one person can recall and recollect. I've went over through multiple times, and even I didn't even include some of the times that small things would happen. Lots of small things happen with this church that cause problems. This church has been through it, but with how old it is, it's almost 2,000 years old. That's another 200 years away, 200 plus years away. But still, it's almost 2,000 years old, and it's been remodeled, rechanged, and added iron and recent technology finds of like iron and steel and all that has been added. But a lot of the build is still there. They have remnants, as I said, in the St. Helena. Uh, People like the Romans, the Muslims, the churches have been through things that people can't. It was captured, controlled by people and empires that are on the top of history. Main empires and people of power have been uh, affiliated with this church. Maybe not being involved truly in the church, but keeping it alive, like in the Muslim. I can't remember his name because it's so long, but he allowed his people, the Muslims, not to touch it before the things happened because he realized the significance it was to a different religion and actually to him. That's why he visited it, because Jewish was a holy man, even if the people in the Muslim faith do not believe he's the God's son, but he still was someone in their history and in their religion, but he realized he did not want to make it a mosque. Uh, the Byzantine Empire, the Crusaders, everything that they went through, the Ottomans, and later in history, the British, and now Israel and Palestine and all these other small places, smaller, like the Georgians, as I previously stated. All kinds of people and nations have controlled this church, but yet it continues to stand, even though everything has kind of went haywire over and over again. Fires, riots, lots of things happening around this church. But it's still standing today, and we get to, if you would like to, go to see that and see the history behind it. I know I'm barely scratching the surface of what's actually happening here and what happened. But I felt like I did a good job at really trying to bring that to life as best I could with some of the pictures I had. And uh, and, and then many other powerful nations controlled this church. Church with the Sepulchre is the holiest place on earth, most people believe. Uh, in the Christian Catholic faith, Jesus is the King of all kings. He died for our sins of all man. To visit this place, he rested of having the true cross there would be a real life altering trip. Many people, even of other religions, want to experience this. As I said, this is the church. This is why the church is so important. It holds near and dear to the people, even the people who do not believe in Jesus, because Jesus is at least represents the people, because Jesus represented this man who was so holy and played a part in all, as Gandhi looked to him. So he's a big role in people's lives all over the world. And it's crazy to me that people, not even of the Christian or Catholic or believers in Jesus, would want to see this, but he plays a role in recent history as close as Gandhi and other peacemakers like Martin Luther King Jr., who took their teaching. So Jesus is a key figure in history who still plays a role in a lot of people's daily, and a lot of people who made a difference in today's world. So that's why it's such a key and holy place, is because it's where he died near this, on the mountain of Calvary near Jerusalem, outside of the church. And the Holy Cross where he was crucified and all that stuff. So it's a big part of this in today's world. Even maybe not the church itself, but the meaning of the church and what's inside the church is big. Uh, Today, the church is a place that holds near and dear to the people of all religions, as I said. The church stands near the original spot, still over the tomb of Christ. It holds place near and dear to people that are followers of Jesus and God. Israel has turned it into a tourist attraction for all people to see. It is known as the holiest place in the world to a lot of people. It draws people from all around the world every year, and it's still a huge part of history. That has a very dark hole and holy background with it as well, with lots of violence, as I said, and went over burnings, deconstructions, and demolishes, and then remodeling and maintenance and things. And yet it's still here. It draws. It seems to always to be the background, even though it is not a main part of history. It's always in the background of history and what it means, as I said. And now, instead of fighting for people of all races and religious backgrounds can visit the church freely. Um, it's just, as I said earlier, it's crazy that this is happening. And like I said, it's crazy to think uh, and just look at these pictures. Like I said, and I'm kind of rambling, I understand. And these are some of the places that I looked, and got most of my information. I had a small tidbits there that weren't from these, but I got most of my information from this book right here. I got some hole fillers and stuff where I couldn't really figure it out without it being uh, too deep, I guess you could say. But getting most of my information from here, I'd like to uh, thank everyone for, I guess, watching. I guess the three people that are going to go over this video. Uh, I hope it was entertaining at least. And it's crazy. I know I'm a Christian myself, but I mean, that doesn't really matter uh, to most people. But I think it's very cool. I didn't know much about the church as being someone from Christian. But even if I wasn't, I feel like it's still a huge key in history today. Maybe not the church itself, but the meaning of Jesus and what he went through, and where he died and rose again. I understand some people aren't religious, and that's fine, and I have no problem with that. But I just feel, as someone who is, it draws me more. But the art, as you can see over here, like I said, I feel like it would be historians and people who really relish these kinds of things to be human history. it would draw you near to it. Thank you again for, if it was painstaking, I apologize. Thank you for watching and listening to the whole Church of the Holy Sepulchre. I've probably botched that name 100 times, and other things like the names of the Muslim that helped and other people, and I apologize for that again. I thank you for understanding. Thank you.